Thank you. Yeah, it's always interesting talking with our world changers. You're getting emails with them, and they're saying, using these coded words. It always takes me a little while to figure out, what are you doing that for? And I once was talking with a friend who was overseas, and after that, they were talking with Michelle, and he said to Michelle, "Yeah, I just was concerned about Jake's language." I'm like, "Yeah, my language has gotten quite a bit better over the years. God's working in my life," and then figured out I had said things like God and prayer and all that. So don't say those words. I am very excited about this month, this Light to the World series that we have planned for us. We have some, as Pastor Jim said, we have some neat things planned. And today I get to introduce a friend of mine. Tracy works with One Child Matters, which is a child sponsorship organization. He's going to tell you all about that. But it's one of the things that I have loved about this work that I'm doing with the church is I get to connect with friends that are trying to change the world, and then find ways that we can support them. And I think it's a great honor for me to do that. I love that, and it's fun to see how you guys have been responding to that over the past year of just kind of reinvigorating our emphasis on missions. So without further ado, Tracy Payno.
Dear God, this is Lionel from Zimbabwe. Thank you for always listening to my prayers. I know you hear me, and I know you love me. We don't have much, and life can be very difficult where we live. But I want to thank you for helping my mom and me. When you brought One Child Matters into our community a few years ago, it changed everything. They gave me food, good clothes to wear, and they helped me in school. When I am there, I learn more about you, that you love me, and that you have a special purpose for my life. I'm learning so much, and now I have so many friends. I am no longer shy or afraid. But the best thing of all is that you gave me a sponsor in America that loves me. She even sends me pictures of her and her family. And I love reading her letters. They always make me smile. She cares for me and my mom, and she's always praying for us. She may live very far away, but she is always in my heart. I love her. Today I sent a letter to her and included a drawing of my plane. It is so fast and can fly very far. And this is good because one day I want to be a pilot so that I can fly all the One Child Matters children with me to meet our sponsors. We want to tell them thank you and show them they are changing the world. Please, God, can you help my dream come true? I love you, Lionel.
It's a privilege to be here this morning, not only to be able to share the story of One Child Matters, but to be with you and share a little bit of my own story. And now, Pastor Jim was talking about how marvelous technology is, and we got to experience at least some of that. I just want to let you know that I'm not really here. This is a hologram. No, I'm really here. But a little over a year ago, God began to work in my life in ways that were unexpected. You know, sometimes you can be really in tune with God. You spend time in prayer and in His Word, and you're paying attention to how the Lord is speaking to you, and you just follow where the Spirit leads. And those are wonderful times, but I'll admit those are too few in my life where I feel like I'm so in tune that I'm like, the Lord's taking me right here and I am following. And that was not one of those times. There are other times when, this is most often the time, where I'm not paying attention. I'm just busy doing life. Oh, yes, I'm praying and I'm reading His Word, but just the busyness of life or the circumstances, situations, and I'm just kind of walking my own path and my own journey, and it takes the Lord to come and His Spirit nudge me and kind of point, going, wait, over there, go that way. Then there are still other times where I just might be lost in my own world, and I feel like I got shoved somewhere and have no clue where I'm at. And then I feel like a little bit like Joseph in the book of Genesis, who, after he had been thrown into a pit and his brothers were going to kill him, but instead sold him into slavery, and he spends time in Egypt, gets thrown into prison for really nothing of his own doing. Eventually, God puts him in the place where He always wanted him to be able to save his family and his brothers. And when he meets his brothers finally, after years of kind of wondering what God is up to, he looks at his brothers and says, "Don't be afraid. What you meant for evil, I meant for good." And that the Lord meant for good. And that I kind of see that sometimes it's I'm paying attention and I follow the Lord. Sometimes it's I'm not paying attention and the Lord has to nudge me. And other times it's the circumstances and situations that God puts me in that He awakens me to the fact that He has something for me and something for me to do. And that's the journey that I think we are all on from time to time, of trying to figure out what is it that the Lord is up to. And for me personally in the last year, that involved kind of a transition to be able to work and to join hands and become part of an organization called One Child Matters. Now, One Child Matters is actually an organization that's been around for over 50 years. It was begun by Assemblies of God missionaries in Calcutta, India, by the name of Mark and Huldah Buntain. And it was called Mission of Mercy for a number of years. And just in the last few years, changed the name, the focus, because over the years, what happened was the programs that were begun in Calcutta, India, ministering to children and ministering to their needs, specifically in 4 different areas. You heard it in that video. Physically, to give them medical care, to be able to provide food for them, to be able to minister to their physical needs, to be able to minister to their educational needs, to provide schooling or tutoring to help them as they learn and they grow, to help their social needs, to develop friendships, and to be able to minister to their families and their communities, the social needs, and most importantly, to minister to their spiritual needs, to disciple them, to make disciples of young children. And what began in Calcutta, India, began to spread. And in the course of several years, it has spread into 14 different countries. We have over 280 projects representing over 40,000 children around the world. And what we minister in each of those countries, in each of those, trying to make a difference in their lives, just like you saw with Lionel in that video. Now, a few months ago, I was able to go to Honduras. If you show the next slide. And I was able to go to several of our projects and to be able to see what One Child Matters does on the ground. Because what we are is a child sponsorship program. That means that what we're looking for is people to walk alongside one child to make a difference in their lives by a monthly donation. It's $39 a month that people around the United States commit to give and make a difference in that one child's life. And I was able to, that side of it I understand, giving money. But the connection that I wanted to see was what happens on the ground. And what is really interesting, I was able to go to see, when we went to Honduras, we were there only for 4 days. And we're able to see about a dozen of our projects and see the children and actually get to go into some of the homes. And as we were walking to one of the homes, matter of fact, the home you see in the middle picture on the bottom row here, that family, and they have the 5 children, 4 boys and 1 little girl. And that family right there, we went to their home, and as we're walking to their home, I was asking the pastor, because I get to go and travel around and tell the story of One Child Matters. So I asked the pastor of this community, tell me something, a story of a family how One Child Matters has impacted that family. And he pointed to a young boy who was probably about 14 years old, who was walking with us as we were walking to this home. And he points to him and he said he's been part of our program since he was about 8 years old. When he came into our program, he could not read or write. He hadn't gone to school, and so he couldn't read or write. His mother, who was a single mother, he had a younger brother. What she did to support their family was she would make tortillas early in the morning before the sun came up, would go out and would sell the tortillas to workers on their way to work. And then she would come home and spend the afternoon making more tortillas to be able to sell to the workers as they're coming home from work. And so what happened was this young boy becomes part of the program and goes through, gets medical care. He begins to learn to read and to write. He hears about Jesus. He goes home. His mother becomes part of the church and part of the community. And he begins to teach his mother how to read and write. And here it is, like 6 years later, the young man can read and write. He's doing well in school. The mother could also read and write. Because she could read and write, now instead of making tortillas, trying to support her 2 boys, now she could get a job and work because she's now literate. And so not only did One Child Matters impact and influence that one child's life, but impacted that entire family. That changed the scope, because now that mother, who is now part of a church and had heard the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ, but also it changed her life because she learned to read and to write through her son. And the pastor was really proud of being able to point to that son. And later on, we met the mother who was actually volunteering at the project as they were ministering to the other children in the community. And that's just one of many stories from One Child Matters. The next photo kind of shows that on that same trip here, we had taken a couple pastors down with us to show them some of the projects. And it's a joy to be able to see these children as they are in the programs, as they are enjoying not just being together and learning and having fun, but hearing the message of Jesus Christ. Now, a few years ago, actually about 2013, there was a sociologist. Actually, he's a professor at the University of San Francisco. And he was a developmental sociologist. And he was kind of getting tired of being asked, if you're a developmental sociologist, in other words, he studied third world countries and how to improve living conditions in third world countries. And people kept asking him, so what is the best thing that we could do to help people in third world countries, to help people who are in need? If we had to boil everything that we do as a government or as a church or as people, what's the number one thing that we can do? And he didn't have an answer for that. And so he decided, I'm going to have my students study it. And so he sent his students over to Africa to begin to study the different programs and what makes a difference. And they, after one summer of studying, they come back and they said, we think we really found one thing that makes a difference. They said, well, what is it? And they said, it's child sponsorship. And he goes, wait, government programs, school programs, feeding programs? They said, well, actually, child sponsorship, one person sponsoring a child in another country through an organization that will minister to all those needs makes the biggest difference. So he, the next year, sends more of his students to actually 6 different countries. They begin to look and they study, they interview over 10,000 children, former children who were either sponsored, some of them were sponsored, some of them were not, and that became the focus of his study. And so he writes an article. It's this next article. It's this next picture. Writes an article for Christianity Today called "Want to Change the World? Sponsor a Child." Because what he discovered was through these interviews and through looking at children, both sponsored and unsponsored, over 10,000 of them, he said that what happened was that a child that was sponsored in a third world country was 40% more likely to finish secondary education. They were 80% more likely to go on into college and finish a college education. That they were more likely to get jobs that were what we consider white-collar jobs, or be able to lift up their economic condition, the economic condition of their family. And it changed something else. And he was looking at it because it changed their perspective. And he's trying to boil down to the one characteristic that it changed the most. And he said, I finally discovered the word that I was looking for, and it was hope. Because the children who were sponsored, and particularly he began to study children who were sponsored through Christian missionaries, Christian organizations, was that their perspective was hope. That a child that was not sponsored could only see themselves doing what they saw their parents doing. So if their mother was selling tortillas to workers to and from work, that's all that they could see. If their parents were, or the people that they looked at, the adults, were only working in the fields or working in the market, that's all that they could see themselves doing in their life. They could not see anything beyond that. But a sponsored child would talk about things like Lionel, who wanted to be a pilot. Or they'd see themselves as a teacher, or a pastor, or a government leader. And so where unsponsored children that would not even be in their realm of possibility. But a child that was sponsored, because really what begins to happen is you begin to change the life of one person, you begin to change the life of a community. I want to tell you another story. This is about two brothers from the Philippines. You'll see a picture here of them. On your left is Sonny Boy. That's his name. And on the right is his brother Florence. Now, Sonny Boy and Florence, our One Child Matters project in the Philippines is a rescue home that rescues children off the street. And we don't have a rescue home in every one of our countries. In some of our countries, there's schools. Others, they're after-school programs that are connected with the churches. In the Philippines, it's a rescue home. And when Sonny Boy and Florence were 5 and 7, they were rescued off the street. Their parents had abandoned them, and they were just surviving on the streets of the Philippines. And they come into our rescue home run by Assembly of God missionaries, Glenn and Nancy Garrison. And they become a part of the program, and they have sponsors through One Child Matters. Now, the time this picture was taken just a little over a year ago. Sonny Boy is 19 years old. Florence is 21 years old. By this time, they have both aged out of the program. 18 years old is when they aged out of the program. But they both went on and went to Bible college. Florence, the older brother who's on the right, has graduated from Bible college and is now the chaplain, the pastor of the program that they were a part of. So he conducts their Sunday morning services. He's the chaplain for the children and ministers visits the families in the community now. So he's the pastor of the program. And Sonny Boy is in Bible college, but when he's not in Bible college, he runs the feeding program that through the home that feeds over 500 children every week. And so you talk about what is the difference that Sonny Boy and Florence's life happened with sponsorship was what would have happened if somebody would not have rescued them off the streets? Where would they be? If somebody wouldn't have cared for them and said, I want to sponsor a child to provide the medical care, to provide the opportunity to receive an education, to provide the social context, and to provide the spiritual context so that they could hear about the story of Jesus Christ and his gospel and what a difference their lives could make, where would they be? Because you know what? Poverty tells children, you don't matter and nobody cares. That's around the world, but especially in third world countries. You don't matter and nobody cares. They can't see themselves going beyond their current circumstances or situations. But what the gospel of Jesus Christ says is you matter and somebody cares. And so when you make a difference in one child's life, you really are, the next slide, you really are making a difference because you're telling them the story of the gospel through a practical means. Now, we have, in One Child Matters, I told you we have 40,000 children that we have sponsors for, or that are in our programs. We don't have 40,000 sponsors. Now, we have several people who sponsor multiple children and have for over the years. We have one, a Christian music artist by the name of Jackie Velasquez. You might have been able to hear. She represents One Child Matters when she goes out and tours. And she hasn't toured over the last couple of years because a few years ago she got married, they started a family, and so she's been recording but hasn't been touring. Well, she's going to go tour for the first time this spring. And so she was going to, again, re-engage and present One Child Matters in her concerts. And so our president of our organization decides he's going to go to Nashville before she starts her tour and just make sure she has all the material and everything that she needs. And so he meets with Jackie Velasquez, her husband, and her manager. And her manager is Indian, from India. And as they're talking, he's going, do you guys ever hear of an organization called Mission of Mercy? That happened to be the name of our organization. I told you we changed it about 4 years ago when we just wanted to focus on One Child Matters. Mission of Mercy was just our ministry when it began in Calcutta, India. And our president goes, well, yes, we are Mission of Mercy. That's who that was our name. We just changed it about 4 years ago when we have this now global impact. And he goes, really? He goes, me and my sister, we grew up in Calcutta, India. And we were sponsored through Mission of Mercy. We were one of your children. And our president goes, really? And he said, I would not have been in school if it wasn't for your organization. My sister would not have gone to school if it wasn't for your organization. We lived in a one-bedroom shack. My parents slept on the floor so that me and my sister could sleep in a bed. And that's how we grew up. But we got connected to Mission of Mercy, One Child Matters, and we were sponsored. Because I was sponsored from the time I was 10 years old all the way through 18. My sister was 8 through 18. And we had the same sponsors all the way through those years. Then I graduated from school. I came to the United States to go to college. I wanted to be involved in the music industry, particularly the Christian music industry. And so I did my internship eventually with this management. And that's how I became a music manager. And he goes, it's amazing. I would not be where I'm at, doing what I'm doing, ministering to the people I'm ministering to and through, if it wasn't for your organization. Well, our president goes back to our headquarters and looks up his files, and he finds several of his pictures of him as a young boy and his profile, and also finds his sponsor. He's never met his sponsor, but his sponsor only lived about 2 hours outside of Nashville. And the sponsor actually was still sponsoring children through One Child Matters. So what they've arranged, and it actually happened a little over a week ago, was at one of Jackie's concerts. As she was sharing about One Child Matters, she had her manager come out and says, I want you to tell your story because you were a child that was sponsored through One Child Matters. And he's telling his story. And he's talking about his sponsors who made a difference. He said, I can't believe that there were people who didn't know me, but that invested in me because they wanted me to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. They wanted my life to be different. They wanted to make a difference. And as he's telling the story, their sponsors come out on stage and stand behind him. And Jackie goes, have you ever met your sponsors? He goes, no. So what would you do if you ever met them? He goes, I don't know. He goes, I'd probably break down and cry. And she goes, turn around. And there they were. They had never met before. An amazing moment, an amazing story, and it also shows what would have happened to that young man if somebody wouldn't have said, you matter, and I care for you. That really is what the gospel message is all about. If I had to boil down, how's God working in me? Why am I where I'm at today? Is because I started asking the question, what does God want from me? What does he want me to do now? And I hope you never get to a place where you stop asking that question. Maybe when you were younger, or maybe when you were new in the faith, you asked that question, God, what do you want me to do? What do you want me? Maybe it was related to a job or a career or important choices and decisions. But I hope that you wake up every morning, or would wake up every morning and ask that question, Lord, what do you want me to do? How can I make a difference in the life of somebody else? And it's really interesting when you look at the message and the ministry of Jesus Christ. In Luke chapter 10, we find an instance where Jesus Christ is walking, he's traveling around. I think in Luke chapter 10, he's probably, just in the context of what happens, Luke chapter 9, it says that he's on his way to Jerusalem. So I kind of think he was on his way somewhere, on his way to Jerusalem, probably on the very road that he begins to talk about, when a young man comes up to Jesus and asks him a question, and he says, what's the greatest commandments? In other words, what is it that God wants us to do? If we had to boil it down to the greatest commandment that God wants us to do, what is it? Now, the other Gospels, Matthew and Mark, record the same or similar instance, and Jesus answers the question. Here's the greatest commandments. Now, in Luke kind of alters the story a little bit. Whether it's happened this way or not, we don't know. But in Luke, it's Jesus turned the question around, and he says, well, you're a lawyer. What do you read? What do you say is the greatest commandment? And the lawyer had the chance to kind of show off, and he said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul. People kind of nodded because they all knew that. He was praying the prayer that every good Jewish boy and every good Jewish girl learns from a young age. They memorize it. It's Deuteronomy chapter 6. It's called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength. And so people, yes, and the Lord, I've got a roll. And he goes, and there's another one, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. People going, yes. You know why they were saying yes? Because when good Jewish boys and girls were learning, and they would memorize Torah. They would memorize what we know as the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. But they didn't have chapter numbers and verse numbers. They just memorized it. And of course, they memorized it in Hebrew. That's what it was written in. That was their language. And to love the Lord your God is a command that starts, and you shall love, the Hebrew word, vahavta. There actually is 3 commandments in Torah that begins with vahavta, and you shall love. The first one, Deuteronomy 6:5, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength. The second one, Leviticus 19:18, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the way people would remember, kind of memory hooks, is similar words. You find this in Jesus' teaching in the Gospels all over the place, where he will take a word, you have heard it said. Or he will take a word, he'll make a play on a word, because people memorized Scripture by these memory hooks, these common words. And seeing there were only 3 commands in the Torah that began with the command, and you shall love, and they prayed one of them several times a day, they knew that was an obvious answer. The second one was also obvious, and you shall love. But I told you there were 3, and the lawyer only said 2, right? Is anybody curious of what the third one was? Jesus actually, this shows, I love Luke chapter 10 and the story of the Good Samaritan, because it shows the creative genius of Jesus, and it also shows his heart. Because then he goes into the story of the Good Samaritan. There was a man who was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. I imagine that Jesus was maybe walking that very road. Maybe he was walking the other way, and from Jericho, which is the lowest city on earth, elevation-wise, he's walking up to Jerusalem. And he's talking about someone coming down from Jerusalem, had been to Jerusalem to worship, and he was walking down, and he fell among robbers. I've been on that road. I've seen that road several times. I've actually driven a dune buggy on that road. I don't think they were driving dune buggies on that road, but I've been there. And it's a place it's in the Judean wilderness. It's a place that was known to be dangerous, and there were robbers waiting. And this traveler coming from Jerusalem to Jericho falls among thieves and is left for dead. And then a priest comes traveling, and he sees them, and the priest sees them. But the priest has other concerns. One, if he touches him and helps him, if he's on his way to Jerusalem, but he touches him and he dies, then he's going to be ritually unclean, so he wouldn't be able to go to Jerusalem to perform his priestly duties. So he has a good excuse. I have to stay clean. I can't get messed up. I can't get dirty. So he walks on the other side of the road and keeps going. A Levite comes along. He sees the man who is left beaten and bruised, robbed, and left for dead. He too, whether it's the busyness or whether it's concern for ritual purity or whatever it is, he also walks on the other side of the road. It wasn't until a Samaritan comes traveling down the road and sees him and helps him and begins to bandage his wounds and puts him on his own animal and takes him to an inn and takes money out of his own pocket and says, here, care for him. I'll come back and I'll settle the account if it's more than this. And in Jesus telling that story in that setting really is also including the third command, and you shall love. Because the third one's found in Leviticus 19, verse 34. And you shall love the foreigner, the one who is without means in your land, the sojourner, the one in need. The lawyer left that one out. But Jesus, in his telling of the parable of the Good Samaritan, includes it and says, this is the heart of the gospel. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength. You shall love your neighbor, the one who is like you, as yourself. But you should also love the one in need. And I would say to you today and this morning that that's the heart of Jesus' message. That is Jesus' heart for us, is that we should love. I loved our worship today, that we would express our love, our thanksgiving, our praise, and we would acknowledge Jesus Christ. We acknowledge God for who he is and the role he plays in our lives. But I also want to extend that to ask the question is, what shall we do because of the great love of God in our lives? If it's truly his breath that is in our lungs so that we can shout praise, what does that same breath do when we reach out to other people and share the message and the love? And how do we do that? And one of the opportunities that I have had is to be able to tell the story of One Child Matters and how people can walk alongside and walk with us and be able to make a difference in the lives of one person, to share the love of Christ and to say, you matter and somebody cares. To be able to love God through our actions. Now, I tell people, pastors get kind of nervous at this point because, they say, wait, you're asking people to give $39 a month to sponsor a child. Does that hurt our church giving? And I say, oh, no, it doesn't. Actually, statistically, it doesn't. Because I'm not asking for tithe money. That belongs in the church. I'm not asking for building fund money. I'm not asking for missions money. You make those commitments and you keep those commitments within the church. What I'm asking for is your Starbucks money, your McDonald's money, your Applebee's money. That's what, and I said that, and now I said that early on, and my wife and I, we sponsor a young girl named Maria. I actually met Maria in Honduras, and I came back and said, I want to sponsor her. She was not sponsored, said, I want to sponsor her, and we sponsor Maria. We just got a letter this last week from her. She's finishing up kindergarten, and we write her, and she writes us. We pray for her. And I say the story, and I say this because what happens to me is I tell people, it's your Starbucks money that I'm after. And I was saying that to a pastor friend of mine as I'm sitting in Starbucks just this last week. And God said something to me. I'm sitting there with my Starbucks cup, and I'm saying, yeah, and I tell people, I'm not after your tithe money, I'm not after, and I give the whole line, I'm after your Starbucks. And I'm sitting there, and God says, you're holding a Starbucks mug. And I'm like, God, and this all happened inside in just a moment. I said, God, I sponsor a little girl. He said, yeah, but you're still drinking Starbucks. And I'm like, I get it. And I actually haven't told my wife this. But what God said to me at that moment was, apparently you have enough to sponsor another child, don't you? And I said, okay, I get this. So with every child I sponsor, if I keep buying Starbucks, you're going to keep saying this. And I could just imagine God in heaven going, you got it. Because where I'm at, I am blessed beyond measure. I can afford to go down to Starbucks and buy a coffee. And for less than one Starbucks coffee a day, not the expensive one, not the chai latte, chocolate frappuccino thing, not just a cup of coffee. For less than a cup of coffee a day, I can make a difference in the lives of young people like Lionel, like Sonny Boy in Florence, like Maria. And you can too. What I want to do and how I want to end today is I want the ushers to come forward. They have some child profiles, and if you kind of advance the slides, it looks like this. And what I want you to do is, if you're thinking, I think God has speaking to me, and I'd like to at least check it out or look at it. You're no commitment at this point. If you'd raise your hand, what I'm going to ask the ushers to do is kind of give you a profile. And that could be a child you could sponsor. If you're like going, well, I would really like to sponsor a little boy and I have a little girl, or vice versa, you can come and exchange it at our table out there. Or if you don't take one now, you can come out to the table anyway. Or if you get out there and you get this and go, I want to pray about it and talk to my spouse about it or something, you can come back by the table and just kind of set it on the table. No, there's no pressure. I just want you to be able to see what you do. So if you turn around, if you'd raise your hand and say, yes, I'd like to look at one. I would like to check it out. Again, to be able to look at it, you'll see, you can fill the information out. You can put on there information credit card information that it'd come out automatically. You could put on there, I want to send a check in, you can put a check, or you can write across where the credit card information is. You can say, bill me, so that if I don't have it today, and we can connect with you. And what will happen, if you fill out the information, you can rip out the card, that card, and you can leave it with me at the table afterwards. If you feel like what I need is, if you take one of these profiles, if you don't fill out the card, you can keep all the information about the child then. But if you don't fill out the card, I need that profile back, because that's a real child that needs a sponsor. And if you keep them, then you've kidnapped them, and I can't get them a sponsor. So don't kidnap one of my kids. So if you don't fill out the form, just leave it back with the table or leave it with an usher, and they can get it back to me after the service. But just to be able to look. But what I want you to do is I'm going to close with a word of prayer. And I want to ask you to really ask the Lord, what do you want me to do? It might be sponsoring a child. I don't like to play heavy and say, you can need to sponsor a child. You'll go to heaven if you sponsor. This is an opportunity you can make a difference in the lives of a young child somewhere around the world. But maybe it's, what could I do today to make the difference in the lives of somebody that I see or meet, or somebody in my family, somebody that's going through a hard time or a difficult time, or just somebody I bump into at Starbucks while I'm feeling guilty because I should have sponsored a child. But asking your question, what does the Lord want me to do? And I would say the answer is this. He wants you to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength, with everything that you have. He wants you to love your neighbor who is like yourself. And he wants you to love those who are in need. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus tells a story about the end of time and how the Son of Man is going to separate people like a shepherd separates the sheep and the goats. And he's going to look at the people on his right, the sheep, and he says, come on, enjoy the rewards of heaven, your eternal reward. And they're going to say, well, why? And he's going to say, well, because when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you came and visited me. When I was naked, you clothed me. In other words, you met my needs. And they said, wait a minute, when did we see you hungry and naked and in prison? And he said, when you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. And then he tells the goats, and he says, hey, you guys are going to punishment. They're going, wait, what did we do? And they said, well, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. You were too concerned with your own stuff. When I was naked, you didn't clothe me. When I was in prison, you didn't feed me. You didn't care for me. And whatever you didn't do for the least of these, you didn't do it to me. I can tell you this, I want to be among those who are on the right. I want to be obedient to what the Lord has for me to do. I want to love my neighbor. I want to love those in need. I want to care for the least of these, because that's what Jesus Christ calls us to do. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness. We thank you for your blessings in our lives. And we thank you for your word and the challenge. And I pray that each of us would be able to ask the question on a daily basis, what would you want me to do today? And I pray that out of abundance of your blessing, that your love for us will flow through us. That we can share our love and we can show our love for you. We can show our love to our neighbor and we can show our love to the least of these and care for them. May your love be evident and may you change lives through our faithfulness. In Jesus' name.